Welcome, Penny. We love doing these interviews, and I'm so excited to do this with you today. So welcome.
You don't know anything about me, so you're going to find out who I am.
Well, I will say that last summit when we did this, I actually learned a lot about you, so I'm sure I'll learn more today. I want to start with breaking down your title. You are a longevity zoologist and a cognitive ethologist. And I know the first time I heard that, I was like, rewind, start from the beginning. So can we start there? What is it that you do, and what does that title even mean?
Okay, well, it's two titles, obviously, really. But so a zoologist just is someone who studies animals, right? So biologist, someone who studies life. Botanist, someone who studies plants. Zoologist, someone who studies animals. But then, of course, that's a really broad thing. And so it's like, which section of that? It's like saying I'm a doctor. Okay, a doctor of what? Are you a GP, specialist, all the rest of it? So within zoology, I focused on animal behavior and primarily, like I did a load of stuff. I did physiology, genetics, behavior, structure and function, anatomy, like all of it, right? But realistically, the main focus is in animal behavior. And then I took a whole bunch of extra classes from the neuroscience department, which was human-based. There was no animal neuroscience. So I studied human brain and neuroscience from the ultra tiny, like microcellular thing, and all of the chemicals opening the gated channels and the synapses and stuff, all the way up to the macro behavioral neuroscience, which is obviously where I'm much more confident and really enjoy that space. So then the longevity side of it came in more recently because of studying. So there's four main pillars, if you want to call it like that, four main measures of animal welfare. And if you go right back to the very beginning of all of this in my journey, it's all about animal welfare. The reason I'm a zoologist is for animal welfare. The reason I want to make friends with animals is for animal welfare. Like everything goes back to them having an amazing life under our care or in the wild. Either way, we have a responsibility to preserve their home or give them everything they need here. So there's four aspects to welfare, right? Some of this proximate and we don't have to get into the technicalities of that, but one of the ones is longevity, and it's usually the one that's neglected the most, because in experimental science, that's going to be a really long experiment to see how long are they living for. Can we change this by, especially if you're doing Galapagos tortoises or something like that, 400 years for your experiment? No one's going to do that, right? So that's why we generally do those kinds of things on flies. Good old Drosophila, who get all their papers written about them because their life cycles like that. So but that was really boring to me. I didn't really care about that kind of thing. I wanted to know the animal as an individual. So I studied all those other aspects of animal welfare, but that was the bit that fell off the table most of the time. And so then I kept coming back to that with but how come they live different lengths of time in the zoo versus in the wild? Why do these ones live, longer or shorter? And why does the rule generally say the bigger you are, the longer you live? Think of elephants and blue whales and this kind of thing, except when it comes to dogs. And the bigger you are as a dog, the less. And I was like, as a scientist, you always want to know why and how. So it didn't make sense, and I wasn't happy with that answer. So I was like, I need to investigate longevity. I need to investigate lifespan, for the science of it, for the welfare of it, to satisfy the itch that was not enjoying that disconnect. But it also obviously means that if we can give them a full, long, natural, healthy lifespan, isn't that our job as their caretaker? Like, who has children and then says, I hope you only get to 20 years old and then you die? Like, no one says that to their kids, right? So why would we have that attitude with our animals?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You almost created your title of a longevity zoologist, because you're a zoologist by trade and training, and you put all this extra emphasis, and that's where your passion really is on the longevity side of things. I think that's one of the things that makes you so unique in what you do, because you have this really unique perspective. And you're always asking why, and you're always wanting to kind of find those answers. And like you said, the answers aren't always super clear cut, because they're doing studies on flies and they're doing studies in humans, and you have to kind of understand the biology and how these different principles translate to different species, and then figure out, okay, well, how do we then implement what we know works? Because we're talking about now animals in captivity, right? Whether it's the zoos or, our pets at home. So where does the cognitive ethologist piece fit in, and what exactly does that mean?
Okay, so that's the specialist on the animal welfare side. So when we look at any quality of life for any individual of any species, you're looking at physiological, the body, the health of the actual shell of the animal, right? And you're looking at the internal, who they are as self, right? So we've got the body, and then we've got the essence of who you are, whether that's soul or spirit or combined, or what you'll have a different name for it from other people, but that's okay. So the cognitive ethology looks at the animal on the inside. Who are they? Where do they fit into their family or their hierarchy, their structure, their species? What roles do they have? What are they amazingly adapted to do in their environment? What motivates them? How do they communicate? How do they problem solve? How do they engage with life? What's meaningful to them? What makes them happy? Really, that's the big question, what makes them happy? But there's a whole lot of unpacking in that. So you've got animal behavior that will look at, what do they do as a normal day-to-day process? And that was what was the main focus when I was in undergrad and things like that. They're looking at, how do they nest build? How do they attract a mate? How do they survive the forest? How do they get out of winter? The kind of what I called the survival behaviors, the normal day-to-day behaviors. But what really interested me, what was going on up here, who is that individual? Who is, that mama deer, or that baby bear, or this loner seal, or whatever it happened to be, who is that individual? And so cognitive ethology looks at who the individual is, treats them as having intrinsic worth, who they are, regardless of what species they are, because we tend to speciate and say, well, pandas are more important than cane toads, for example. Anyone in Australia will know that we hate cane toads because they're a pest species and they've got a very bad reputation. But when you look at the ethics of animals, what really makes a cane toad any better or any worse than a panda, and vice versa? Well, that's another whole question. So animal ethics is something that I do that gets woven into cognitive ethology as well. But the cognitive just means what's happening up here, the higher functioning, the processing, the problem solving, the intelligence, if you like, but it's a really grey word to use in science. And ethology is the study of animal behavior. So like I said before, zoology is the study of animals. Ethology is a speciality of that, the study of animal behavior.
What led you here? Like, did you always want to work with animals? Were you one of those kids who's always like rescuing, stray dogs and, feeding the feral cat? Like, was this always in your just calling to you, speaking to you, who you were?
This was always in me. Yeah. Like I used to, gosh, all my earliest memories are of animals. Like I don't specifically remember a time when a person like became the memory and have a, but they obviously were, but they're not sharp focus, whereas my animal ones are super sharp focus. So I just know that that's a sign that, that they've been there all along. But it was two things. There was a gorilla and there was a sea lion, and they pointed me slightly differently, but effectively in the same direction. So I met the sea lion when I went to Melbourne Zoo when I was 5 years old, and I saw a keeper go into the enclosure with them. And I had never seen a person go inside a zoo enclosure before. I'd been to the zoo before, but I hadn't witnessed that. And that just went, oh, okay, we can be friends with wild animals. That opened that possibility up, and that was it. I was instantly hooked for life on being friends with wild animals. And they had an interaction, they did some training, and they did some enrichment, and they did some exercising. They were friends, and it was amazing, and my life changed that day. The second one was the gorilla. and probably a lot of you guys have heard of Coco, the gorilla who can do the sign language and speak, and she was working with Penny Patterson over in California, and then Coco had a kitten, and that's when we sort of could first empirically say that animals had a sense of humor, because there was things, anyway, it was incredible. And I had this National Geographic that had Coco and the kitten on the front cover of that, and I read that as a small child. I can't remember, but I was just like, oh, okay. So now I found, first of all, I found out that we could talk, we could be friends. We could be friends with wild animals. Now science had opened a way for me to talk to wild animals. And that was it. I was like, that's the direction I'm going. Nothing on this planet will stop me. And everyone said, you can't do that. The job doesn't exist. There's no pathway forward. You won't get any money for that. No one's going to pay you for that. There is no need for that. That's just a fairyland, pixie, wonderful unicorns land that you live in, but it's not reality. You need to become a vet. You need to become a doctor. You need to become a whatever that's going to, and you just do that on your side as your hobby. I was just like, are you kidding me? This is not a hobby. This is the essence of me.
Did you get to have the experiences? Have you gotten to have the experiences that you always hope to have in terms of interacting with the wild animals and befriending them and, supporting their well-being?
I mean, yes, I have. It's never enough, because you look at it and go, so I go to the zoo with people. I take people to the zoo. They quite like going with me because I know a few things about animals. So they're like, why is it doing that? And I'm like, oh, because. And so this is quite fun. But people are like, okay, let's move on now. We've seen the polar bear. And I'm like, yeah, I'm still like connecting with the polar bear. I'm still watching the polar bear. I'm still learning who this polar bear is compared to the one that I met in this other zoo one other time. Or I'm looking for differences. I'm reading the patterns. I'm looking at where are the whiskers, what the hands do, like the whole thing. And people are like, yeah, okay, I'll see you down at the cafe, kind of, And I've been known to spend, half a day in front of one enclosure. Obviously not really when I'm hosting friends around the zoo, but on my, I just want to get to know every single one. So you might think, as a normal person, I've seen polar bears now, that box has been checked. Next time I go to the zoo, I might glance at the polar bear, but I've seen one now. So it's sort of like, that's done. For me, that never ends. I don't know that polar bear. I haven't met this one before. I don't know who he or she is yet. So that's how I feel. You asked me the question, have I had enough of those experiences? No, because I haven't met every Siberian tiger, every Amur leopard, every maned wolf, every pinniped, I've only met a few. I've met the tiniest handful of them, and it won't be satisfied until I've met and helped in whatever way they need. And sometimes they don't need help, so we can just be friends without me servicing in any way, without me giving to them. But most of them I found have a need that isn't being fulfilled, because we're imperfect. Despite our best of intentions, we're imperfect in the way we look after animals. So there's usually a need, whether it's psychological, whether it's a health thing, there's something else that I can do.
So how do pets come into this? How did you go from working with from working with supporting animals in captivity in a zoo setting to our fur babies at home?
Well, I grew up with pets, and they're who I've kind of had to practice on, if you like, so I practice my communication skills, I practice my observational skills, I practice my training skills, because I have a relationship and continual access, right? And whereas at the zoo, it's like only during open hours, or only during training sessions, or only when you're working with that collection. So there's a limitation somewhere along the way. So pets mean that limitation is sort of eliminated. But I assumed, and this is where, we all make mistakes when we assume something, but I assumed that pets were being given what they needed, because we'd been doing the whole, I have a pet for however many centuries, right? Ancient Egyptians had cats, right? So, I mean, pets isn't a novel new idea, but we actually get so much of it wrong. And I knew what we were getting wrong in the zoo, because I'd seen it, and I was going to conferences and learning things, and I was pulling from what nature does, and these are wild animals, and so it made a lot of sense. And then I started looking more deeply into pets, and I was like, "Whew, okay, we've really missed a lot. We're basing our assumptions on assumptions that other people base assumptions on, or it's marketing of a company that's teaching you one thing, this is the right thing to do, or the right product to buy, or whatever else, and it's marketing rather than animal welfare at the heart. So fine, you need to market, you need to have a product, you need to be a company, you need to have success, but tell the truth. And when you don't tell the truth, then that's, in my book, not acceptable. So I brought all this stuff out of the zoo and out of the wild to say, here's the truth. And it's not my truth, it's the science. And it's all of the ancient history that we've got, knowing about how, how animals live, and putting those things together. So it's putting nature and science together and saying, there's truth. I didn't make it up. I didn't invent this truth. It's not my opinion. Here it is. Why aren't we doing that? That's the answer. And when you do this, the outcomes are phenomenal for the quality of life of that animal, for the length of life for that animal, for the value of their life, and for the value of your relationship with them. So there's 4 measures all being checked off by bringing the truth of science and the truth of nature together and giving that.
So you said that you had assumed that we were doing what we needed to be doing with pets. And it sounds like you were coming at it from the angle of thinking, all right, so I'm going to help with the enrichment of their life, with their quality of life, which is, if anyone's familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is kind of how I'm thinking of it, where we have like this pyramid, and at the bottom, we have like your basic needs, right? Like you have to eat and breathe and have shelter, and then you kind of work your way up. Right? This is for no matter what kind of animal you are. And then at the top, you're like living your best life. You have like your hobbies and your enrichment, right? But like the foundational pieces have to be met. And the kind of top of the pyramid, if you will, sounds like what you're so passionate about is that mental health piece, that welfare piece, that quality of life. And you're going in at this level, and then you're like, wait a second, they don't even have their basic needs being met. And so it's like you had to like climb back down. And now I mean, a lot of what we talk about, we definitely talk about the top of the pyramid stuff, but a lot of the speakers we have here in the summit, we're talking about foundational stuff, right? We're talking about how to nourish your dog or cat, how to like have them in a safe environment. And then we also talk about the enrichment stuff. So is that what you mean in terms of like, is the hierarchy of needs kind of similar to what you're talking about in this kind of
absolutely. Yeah, humans have their hierarchy of needs and animals do too. Now the actual specificities will be different, because what a red deer wants and what a sea lion wants are going to be 2 different things, but the concept, the foundational theory behind it is exactly the same. So you're right, you've got to start by having sanitation, fresh water, and somewhere to live, and that's not really where I spend time, because that's done and dusted. They're either in your house or in the wild, right? That's not my thing. So, but then we move up, and this is exactly what I found, because I was working up on this level with this higher tier of sort of really, optimal this and full freedom of that and totally best case scenario stuff to really raise up the quality of life. And I realized there was some animals I couldn't help. There was a block, and I knew this stuff worked, and I knew what I was doing, and I was watching the animal, and I knew who they were. There was still a block. So I was like, okay, if that's the case, something underneath, something on a lower level is broken, and they can't get to this level until that level is solid. Mm-hmm. So I had to, as you say, literally climb back down the ladder and come back to health down here and say, what's missing in health? And that opened up the biggest can of worms, because everything I looked at had been corrupted and compromised. Go back, I don't know enough about the history of pets to sort of qualify speaking about that, but I know that prior to the wars and really the turn of the 19th century to the 20th century, when commercial food became a thing, pets just got scraps, because they fed for themselves in the wild, and they hunted and they got scraps. And then we invented kibble and processed food and commercialized pet food, and it started this massive downhill cycle. Some of the other things were less nefarious in the sense that they weren't, marketing lies and deliberate, things, but it's just the accumulation of pollution in our environment and the lack of detoxing and knowing how to detox our pets. But it didn't matter what I looked at, every aspect of basic health care for animals had been corrupted or compromised or deteriorated to such a point that our animals were surviving but not thriving, and their years were coming back to the halfway point. We've eroded back half of their natural lifespan. I'm not talking about artificial lifespan extension or some weird kind of genetic manipulation weirdness. No, just their natural. So that showed me that, okay, it's not just the zoo where we need to be mindful of animal welfare and make sure that they're not bored and all those kinds of things that I'd spent a career doing. We had to give our pets and our zoo animals basic health principles. And so there are 8 of those that I learned, I've devised this system of addressing these 8 things based on the millions of things that I was studying and simplified it down to that. But food, and you're absolutely right, nourishment, food is the first one, because that's the foundation of how you keep going, and if you don't put the right things in, you're not going to get any kind of decent output. Mm-hmm. And the list goes on. But
well, let's dive into these pillars. This was, when you and I met, we both kind of had our, without knowing each other, we each had our, I had my pillars on the human health side, you had your pillars on the animal health side. And when we were like, oh, we each have our pillars in health and longevity, and we shared what they were basically the same. So we use different words, or categorize them differently, but they were essentially the same, which is really how we've kind of structured our coaching programs or teaching, because it's again, it crosses species lines. So let's kind of dive into what your 8 pillars of animal health, wellness, longevity are. And you already named one of them, which is species appropriate diet.
Right. Yeah. So diet, nutrition, species appropriate is the key thing here. And the biggest takeaway with that is it's raw natural food, because there is no animal that barbecues. Lions don't sit around a campfire. Wolves don't get their barbecue tongs out. It's just, they eat raw. So appreciate that's not always the right answer for the person at home, but that's your starting point. And if you can't do that, then you work back a little bit to what you can do. But species appropriate raw diet, nutrition, number 1. Number 2, air and water. Now that sounds ridiculous, because animals can just get air and water. Well, can they? I mean, yes, they can. How clean is it? What are they getting inside your home? How much space and access to nature do they have to get clean water and clean air? These are questions that are often not thought about, but in your home, you've got so many pollutants and off-gassings and VOCs and chemicals and things that are in there. The quality of life, the quality of air in there, in your home, is very subpar compared to outside, even in a built-up urban environment. It's about 400 times worse inside than it is outside. How much time do pets spend outside? Well, how much freshness and cleanliness are they getting then? And also the concept of wind. There's no messages being carried inside a house, because there's no ability for airflow unless you've got open windows on both sides, which happens in the summer, but most of the time we have those closed. So, and water. We're getting toxic water out of the tap. It's all full of chemicals and pharmaceuticals, heavy metals, the list goes on. And so are you filtering that water? Are you structuring that water? Are you putting hydrogen back in that water? Are you turning that water into a nourishing whole food, rather than being this sort of contaminated, chlorinated, fluorinated, toxic soup? So air and water. Then we have the importance of detox, right? If you don't get those chemicals out from wherever they've been coming in, how is the body going to optimize? So you absolutely have to detox on a regular basis. And when I say regular, at least weekly and preferably daily, right? Are all your animals' detox pathways optimized and working properly? Do they need to be supported in any way? Then there's the microbiome. And so we're very familiar with this as a word now, but there's the microbiome of the gut that does all the digestion, assimilation, and uptake of your nutrients in your body. But you've got the oral microbiome, dental issues, and how much that affects the entire system of the animal, and the skin microbiome, and how many dogs and cats are suffering from skin problems and itchiness. So setting the microbiome is absolutely foundational. You can't skip over that. In the wild, again, they'll be getting the dirt on them, which is actually cleaning, because it's the microbes. And that, birds dust bathe. We think, how do you get clean if you're bathing in dust and dirt? Well, they do, because it's a microbiome environment rather than a detergent in sanitization thing. Where have we got up to? So then we've got natural environments on a broader scale. So being able to earth and have your paws touching the ground and get out your positive ion charges in your body, to get the negatively charged ionatic air that then you get from the sea and from the mountains and forests. Are they spending time in those kinds of environments, or are they in an urban environment where it's very positively charged? So there's a whole bunch more with it. How much sunshine are they getting? How much salt and things are they getting? So there's a whole lot of natural environment exposure. So that's a whole pillar. Then we have, let me think, which order am I doing? So then we have exercise and movement, which are two different things. Exercise is getting your heart rate up and doing things in your body and stretching yourself, challenging yourself. But movement is literally just the movement. And how fluid are you? How are your muscles sliding across each other? Are you able to stretch and have flexibility? Are you or you just lying in your basket all day? So animals in the wild very seldom get a lot of lazy time unless they're an apex carnivore, because an apex carnivore will be able to get enormous amounts of calories in one feed and then be able to digest that and chill and relax. So we see lions lying around looking lazy and we think all of nature's lazy. Well, no, it's not. Most of the animals are not stopping and having that kind of sedentary moment. But even after they've had that, they've got to get back up and do all the pride protections and hunting again and whatever. So movement and exercise. Then we have mental health. So this is where I start to bring in some of the cognitive ethology side of things. And are we enriching them in their mind? Is their mind staying active? We're told, do crossword puzzles and Sudoku and learn a foreign language and keep your calculus sharp and all those fun things so your brain is still sparking, right? Well, we're not going to teach animals to do those things, but we give them challenges. We give them the opportunity to have new environments, to learn, to discover things. So all of that comes into the mental health component. And then how valuable is your relationship together? So that falls into that as well. Are you communicating clearly with each other? Is there a really strong trust-based thing there? Because if an animal is living without those things, then stress starts to flare up. If they don't know what the rules of the game are, if they're being scolded all the time, if they're feeling anxious around other animals because they weren't socialized correctly or whatever, stress. So stress and mental health are going together in that pillar there. And it's a huge pillar, but I just narrow it down to what's essential for, the very basics. And then we've got sleep and hormones. So without sleep, you don't heal. How have you set up your animal to be able to get the sleep they need? Because we often come along and go, oh, you're so cute, and you just snatch them up and they're in the middle of a sleep and now you've woken them up. Was that really the right thing to do? Are you giving them beds that are clean, or are their beds toxic and off-gassing things? How often do you wash their beds? Like, there's just so much when you start digging into it. And then the weight and the hormones thing, well, over 60% of pets are overweight or obese. That's going to take 3 years off your life on average, just being overweight or obese as a pet. And we think, oh, it's funny because they're chunky and, look how waddly they are. It's not funny at all. You're literally making your animal handicapped. You are giving them a disability of the inability to move properly, the inability to function properly, the inability to enjoy life on the level that they want to. So that's a really key thing. And I mean, that's obviously tied to the food. And you clean up the diet and you tend to clean that up magically by itself. The two just go together. So you don't have to, once you do that, this just solves itself. But the hormone dysregulation as well from early spay and neuter, rather than allowing the animal to actually reach full maturity, have its bone plates close up, to have full intellectual capacity before you start meddling around with their hormones. So that's also in that pillar there. So very broad, but they're all pretty basic things, because they're told, feed your animal, get them a bed, get them a bowl for their food, get them neutered, get them vaccinated. They're all the basic things that we're told, but we're getting almost every single one of them wrong.
I feel like we could do a whole interview on every single one of those and still not have enough time, because like you said, it's basic, but there's so much nuance and there's so much science behind it. And at the end of the day, because they live with us, we have to call all of those shots, whether or not we want to, whether or not we realize it. And so it's not just about it's not just about the one or two things that you should be doing. It's about understanding the why, because when you understand the why, then the how is going to come into a better perspective in terms of what that looks like for you, your pet, your lifestyle, your environment. And that's what I think is so great about just kind of what you do, which is providing education so that folks can understand the nitty gritty without getting overwhelmed with it, right? So for example, the whole toxins and detoxification. I mean, this is a question we get, or a topic we get questions about all the time. How do I detox my pet? And it's like, or what supplement should I give? Or what food should I include? And it's like, hold on. You're skipping a lot. And you have to go back and understand, well, what are toxins and what is detoxification? What are the pathways? And then you can start kind of looking at this in a more nuanced approach, because when we read or hear kind of blanket statements or recommendations, while it can be a good kind of guidance and get us thinking, it's really important to understand what that means for our pet and for the life that we're providing them and the environment that we're kind of giving them. Because then when you run into stumbling blocks, you know how to navigate that.
Right.
What does that kind of look like, just as I'm saying that? What are you thinking right now? What does that look like in terms of the experiences that you've had in supporting people in all of this?
I think the biggest moment is, well, the starting point needs to be discovering that despite your best intentions and the amount of love that you have for your pet, that you've been misled. That acknowledgement, because you can't do anything if you don't realize that there's a problem. So there's plenty of people who are going to say, doesn't matter, this is good enough, right? So those people aren't my clients. That's not who I work with, right? Because if good enough's your thing, then you're probably not my person. I want the person who wants the animal, their pet, their fur baby to have the best, right? And there's loads of them in the world, so plenty of people to help, right? But acknowledging that that's the case, but then also the important step I take people through, first of all, is to let go of guilt, because you don't know what you don't know, so you can't blame yourself for not knowing. You can't blame yourself for any mistakes you made in the past if you didn't know anything else, because you only fed this version of the story rather than the full picture. So letting go of guilt is fundamental, and I can't help people go through everything when they're carrying that with them, because it holds them back. It makes them scared to try. It's their second guess. And of course, their pets are picking up on all of those negative emotions and stresses. So it doesn't actually progress very well. So sometimes it's just a little bit of like, almost like human counseling, I guess, to just help people lose that. But then you don't need to know all of the science. Like when you work with me, you don't have to know the science. You don't need to know any of that at all. Like I did the 20 years of study, so you don't have to, kind of thing. Okay. So I can take you through from here to here in a really short space of time, because I can give you whatever answer to your question. If I don't know, I'll tell you and I'll go and find out, but I can give you the answer to any question that you need to know to be able to get you to take the action, and then show you, well, these are some examples. This is what I use. This is what I would recommend. In this case, you would do this because of that. So none of it is prescriptive and diagnostic. It's all advice, recommendation, and with this foundation of first principles. First principles are animals need correct nutrition for their cells to do what the cells need to do. And when the cells can do their thing, the organs will work, the systems will work, the flow will work, the energy will be created, and the animal will thrive, right? So you just go back to first principles, look after your cells, and then everything takes care of itself. So what do cells need to do their thing? Species appropriate raw food. So that's all you need to know. Species appropriate raw food. What species do you have in front of you? Is it a dog or a cat, a ferret, a horse? Okay, now we do that. And then you don't have to worry about all of that. If you're interested, I'll answer your questions, but otherwise we can skip it. And then we can move on to, okay, so is there a problem that we need to address and rewind the clock on those symptoms or challenges? Or are we just looking to clean up everything and make it a solid foundation that then you can build the next tiers on, so that your animal has that fully optimized life?
I think both of those are so key when we're thinking about making any kind of changes. The first one is having the foundational knowledge, like you said. Is it a cat, dog, a ferret, right? What is it? This is the species appropriate diet. But then let's be real, right? We all run into struggles, right? Okay, my cat refuses to switch to raw, or my dog has this food sensitivity, or right, whatever it is in terms of our unique struggles. And this is where it's so valuable to have someone supporting you, so that we don't go down the Dr. Google rabbit hole, right? Of what do I do for this? Or what do I do for this? And having someone who can, like you said, that's really key, is to be able to filter through your however many decades of education and experience you have, to be able to, you can pull in and go, oh, okay, yep, this. Here are 5 recommendations. Here are different things to think about. What's the root cause of this? And to be able to just kind of present that in an individualized way. So it's really both. It's having that knowledge and understanding, and then having individualized support to help you get unstuck, whether that's questions, whether that's questions specific to your pet's health, whether that's questions specific to challenges, or questions about the biology and physiology, if that's your thing, right? So that's just so important. And at the end of the day, what you said about letting go of guilt probably speaks to every single person listening. I mean, I know that that's something I've really struggled with. I know that's something you've struggled with, and I don't think we can say it enough. I don't think we can emphasize it enough, because that really does hold us back. And the best, I heard this saying one time, it's like the best apology is changing your behavior. And I think we have a lot of guilt, and I know as a pet parent, I have this kind of guilt around, well, I wish I would have done this and I wish I would have done that. But as soon as I've learned and have the support, I've changed. And like, isn't that the most beautiful apology you could ever give? And your pet's not holding that against you, right? Like they know, and to see it, it's like when you make these changes, you can see them kind of come to life, and like you're responsible for that. And that's kind of that's a beautiful thing. So instead of holding on to that guilt, feeling empowered that you can actually do something about it. And it's never too late to start making those changes. I mean, the reason why we met was, I mean, yes, we were like nerding out over things, but one of the reasons was because like, I need your support, Penny, for my puppy and my, because they were both, Birdie and Peanut were both having some health issues at kind of opposite ends of the life spectrum, the young and the senior. And I've been truly shocked at how far Peanut has come. I mean, she's almost 16, and like I feel like she's aging in reverse at this point. Like she's acting like she was now at 13 and 14, when a year ago I was really, really concerned at what was happening to her quality of life and her health. So it's really powerful no matter when you start. Of course, the earlier you can start, the better, right? I mean, when you gave me tips for Birdie, her health issues cleared up literally in 3 days. Like I am not exaggerating, 3 days, when the vets we had been going to her whole life. I mean, how old was she when we met? She was like 5 months, and no one could help. Like we went to multiple vets, we saw multiple specialists, and you were like, oh yeah, do these 3 things. And I was like, wait, what? And she's better. So yeah, again, just bringing it back to, it's never too late to start. No. It's never too late to make changes. And if we let the guilt hold us back, and if we're afraid to expand our minds and expand our knowledge for fear of knowing what we've done wrong, that's a disservice to us and to our pets.
Yeah, it is. And so what I try and do is, you'd think actually that my clients or my patients are the animals, but in large part, it's the pet parents who, right? Because we've grown up or been indoctrinated in a belief system that says if you haven't studied medicine, you don't know about health. You're not qualified to make health decisions. And that's completely wrong, because first of all, you know your body better than any doctor, right? They all know how to do certain things, but they'll only know how to do the things that they've been trained and learned, taught how to do, right? So if they've been taught this kind of medicine, that's all they can tell you. If they've been taught that kind of thing, but if they've taught lots of things, then they've got more insight, but they don't know your body. You know your pet better than anybody else, right? You know your pet better than your vet does. So when you're picking up on the signs, that's significant. So to enable you to be equipped to have those conversations with the vet or whoever the other healthcare professionals are for your family, you need to have a sense of confidence yourself. So I do a lot of how to become a confident health advocate for your pet, how to become a confident health advocate, which means to say, I now know this much information. I'm not an expert in this, but I now know this stuff that I didn't know before. And I'm going to say no, thank you to a vaccination on a yearly basis. Whereas before I didn't know that, I just obeyed the white coat. Like the medical supremacy kind of, you've got all the right answers and I'm not medically trained, so therefore I'll just agree with you. Now I know that that's highly detrimental to my animal and completely unnecessary from their biology. They're already protected, right? We don't get an immunization top up every year for immunization we had as a child. We've got that immunity for life, right? Why on earth are we doing this to our animals and giving them a toxic load and incredible stress on the body when they don't need it? So now you're empowered as a pet parent with the knowledge that that's not necessary. Now, if you want to do it for whatever reason, that's your choice. You have agency over your pet. That's why you're the pet parent, right? But you don't have to do it. You don't have to agree with the vet when you have a science that says something other that is going to confer better quality of life and better health. So to become a confident health advocate for your pet, you need to know that foundational level. So that's where I take you as the client on that journey, and then what we're doing together as a team is administering how to actually put into practice, well, what does species appropriate raw food look like? Or what does clean water look like and where do I get it from? Or what pet bed is not going to be poisoning my pet while they're sleeping? Well, of course, I can help you with the outworking of all of that. And that's why the coaching is so key, because as you take that pathway, there's another question that pops up. There's another scenario. There's another decision that needs to be made. There's another thing that somebody says to you and like, oh, I don't know. So you come back to me for the next round of coaching, because I know it doesn't happen overnight. I've done that journey myself. It takes a long time, and I had to do it without a coach. There was no one who was helping me on this pathway, right? And I'm not bitter and twisted about that. I had a great time doing it, but it's slow, right? So we don't have time to be slow for our pets when we love them. So the journey I take you and your pet on, if you want to do this and build that foundational health piece that then you can build up those next levels, is not just a one and done. It's a conversation that we keep having on a regular basis, and I constantly take you all the way through the entire thing. And then your dog or cat or ferret or horse or whoever, right, is going to have what Peanuts had, and that aging in reverse. It's going to have what Birdie had, and the symptoms dropping off super fast. But it didn't happen in one day with one conversation. We had multiple, and then so.
And I am privileged in that, I can just send you a little message like, hey, what do you think about this?
Right, but that's exactly what I want to make available to other people as well, right? So it's not this very formal, stiff, right, well, here we are in our one hour meeting or whatever it is, right? It's a conversation. I mean, I text my clients, we're friends, we become family. It's very informal, it's very engaging. I'm part of the thing with you, and when they get better, I'm celebrating too. It's not very dry and clinical. This is like, you come into this world with me, you become part of the family, and it's, and then you start hearing about other clients and the zoo animals, and so yeah.
I think what you said about it not being one conversation being done is really key, because in a scenario like this where we have the summit and it's a series of conversations. I mean, between now our conversations, it's 20 interviews that people have listened to, have heard, and they're all over an hour. So, I mean, you do the math, and each one is jam-packed with a million different things. And even just through this conversation, I'm sure people who are listening, questions are coming up and like, oh, I want to learn more about that and that and that. And you can understand how this would just kind of blow up in terms of how much you could talk about and learn about. And you have to start with the foundations, and you have to start with the first step for you. One thing that people say a lot, and we see this in the Facebook, people are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And also like, I'm going to have to go back and rewatch like 20 times because it's information overwhelm, right? And the key is really starting somewhere and implementing whatever is the lowest hanging fruit and whatever is most relevant for you at each time. And that's why, the summits are meant to speak to everyone, so that no matter where you are in your pet's health journey or your own health journey, you can pull something from that. You can gain something from that. But what's kind of different about having a more individualized approach is that you can kind of start at the foundation and just learn about each piece, implement it, and then come back and go to the next piece. And so I'm just saying that to remind folks who are listening, who are feeling like, okay, now what do I do? Just start with the beginning. Start with the first step or two, because you can't do everything all at once, and you're actually not really supposed to. Like, the body doesn't work like that, right? You have to first, for example, if we're going to be working on detoxification, you need to open up those detox pathways before you can start liberalizing those toxins, right? You have to go in the proper order. So, if we're trying to do all these biohacking, really cool stuff, like, okay, are they like getting clean water and species appropriate diet, right? So starting with whatever the next step is for you. And I know that's, again, something we do in the coaching program. We start at the beginning and allow to try things, implement things, come back with questions. Okay, we're sorted there. Great. Now next step. Because I think this time that we live in, we live in with all of the media and search engines, there's a lot of information out there. And the truth is you don't need all of it all the time. Like you really, really, really don't. It's okay, right? You just need this little piece, the next relevant piece for you. And then, but if you don't do anything with that, nothing changes. And so what you're saying about providing support and getting unstuck when you run into different scenarios or you have different questions, you're there to help folks get to kind of the next level, so to speak, and get unstuck.
Because once you get past those eight foundational pillars of juvenescence, which is juvenescence is just the staying and feeling young. Like, doesn't matter how many birthdays you still have that youthful vitality about you. So the 8 pillars I just talked about there are all going to give you that. But then to go up the next level, to start really optimizing, there's another whole like collection of stuff that I work with. So I haven't talked about that yet because I realized I wanted to start there, and I realized that I couldn't start with taking people, pets and zoo animals there. They needed to have this one first. But once you've done this one, then I can help you go to here. So we've got things on this level like stem cell therapy and using light therapy, low level laser light, infrared light, sonic therapy, using sound waves and a whole lot of other things, and then the electromagnetic spectrum and the things that you can pull from that in terms of the body is highly electrical, and when you get that sorted out, so using PEMF and frequency specific microcurrent and all this kind of very specialized therapy work, there's more in there as well. So I've got 8 of those too. So there's 8 foundational, and then there's 8 secondary. So there's just way more than you think that can be done. The body is phenomenally intricate and integrated, and it works with the natural environment. It works with creation. It works with nature to be optimized. And if we separate from that and artificialize our lives and turn them into sort of, plastic isolated bubbles, then we get sick. So for anyone who feels like they've already conquered those foundational steps, did you know, right, that now you can literally turn back the clock and do aging in reverse, right? Now, I'm not pretending for 1 second or advocating for a moment that we try and become immortal. That's not the purpose in any of this, right? I'm not some kind of weird, crazy, doctor with, hair and on a private island and, I don't know, servant monkeys or something, but right?
Your description of what that person would be like was just insane. An island and hair. I love that. Okay, keep going.
So that's not me. That's not Dr. Zoolittle at all. Dr. Zoolittle is an animal welfare zoologist, right? So everything I'm doing is to improve the quality of life for your pets. And so if living longer, younger, with everything functioning and everything happy, right? Isn't that the goal? So that's what it's all designed to do, but you have to do it in the right order, is what I'm saying. And again, most people haven't taken the time to learn all that because zoology wasn't their thing. Now, if zoology is my thing, do I know how to do accountancy? No. Right? Do I know how to build a spaceship? No. Right? Can I be the president of the United States? No. But I can be the zoologist guy. So I can do all those questions and help you with your animals and bring them up on that level. But you need an expert to take you if you want to get the, in a sense, it's sort of like the NASA of zoology, right? It's the dream. Like NASA's got such a conceptual thing to, it's like, oh my gosh, like exploring these space unknown and go where no man's gone before, discover things, the cutting edge of science. Like it's really exciting. And that's where I feel that I'm sitting in zoology. It's on the edge of all these discoveries that we're finding out about how amazing the bodies are, what animals can do. And then there's another whole thing that I haven't even talked about yet, which is the cooperation, the anthrozoology, which is humans and animals, the relationship that we have, that bond, but what we can achieve when we work together to solve a problem. Right. And so I've done some research and some project work with that, where we've looked at, okay, well, we've found out, not me, but a very clever scientist who's worked with cetaceans for many, many years, worked out that whales can predict earthquakes 3 months in advance of an earthquake event.
Wow.
right? So why don't we cooperate with nature, with these species? Because they can help tell us something that no amount of technology that we've come up with so far can tell us. If we're lucky, we get like 2 hours, 20 minutes, maybe, you know, notice of an event like that. Well, how can you evacuate a city in that? You can't. But if you've got a lead time like 3 weeks or whatever it is, right, then that's totally different. So I said 3 months earlier. That's wrong. It's supposed to be 3 weeks. I got excited. So, but 3 weeks, right? So you work with animals. I mean, they will tell you when the thunderstorms are coming. You can recognize a bunch of things. But I mean, going back to NASA, for example, NASA wanted to come up with some way of cleaning the outside of the International Space Station because it was getting space debris grubbiness on it, right? And then its satellites weren't working so well. And they're like, okay, well, what can you put on the outside that's not going to fall off? But we can't use glue because we can't leave like glue on the panels because then they won't work. So they went to nature and they look, okay, well, who can go on the outside of things and not fall off? Well, insects and lizards. So they started looking at the feet of insects and the feet of lizards, and they nailed down the gecko, who has these really special frilly mittens. If you look really close under a microscope, thousands of little tiny sheets of skin that go in alignment, like, you know, if you turn a mushroom upside down, you can see those little gills. It's kind of like that. So that, and the force of the pressure on one side of the suction cup to the other, because these kind of work as a linear suction cup system, means they've got phenomenal grip to be able to scamper around on verticals and horizontals, right, without falling off, but leaving no residue. There's no slime, like a snail will leave that slime trail, yeah? So they copied the gecko to build a robot to be able to go on the outside of the space station to keep it all clean using gecko hands, you know? So we can work with animals to find out solutions to problems, whether it's copying a behavior like a mimicry functionality like that, or whether it's a cooperative relationship where we're picking up on communication and therefore doing this thing with the whales, for example. But I mean, we already know that we're using animals to help us solve problems, because who hasn't heard of guide dogs for the blind? Right, that was the precursor to this whole thing, but we stopped kind of there with most people's awareness. But there's just so much more. How can we use cows to actually frighten away lions from other cows? Well, you can. You just draw great big eyes on their bottoms, so it looks like there's huge eyes glowing in the dark. So all the cows have got big eyes on their bottoms, and the lions come along and go, oh, good Lord, there's an awful lot of predators out here. I'll nick off and go over there, and so they don't get hunted, you know. So you don't have to have people shooting lions. You can just paint eyes on cows' bottoms.
Amazing.
But you can stop elephants from trampling through people's vegetable gardens and farms and things. So often in Asia and Africa, you've got farms, you've got elephants that are free roaming through the jungle. And of course, they go, delicious vegetable garden, thank you for the restaurant. And so people then have to put fences up, that's expensive. They're going to put warning systems, alarms, they're going to deter the elephants. So it's a pain, right? But elephants don't like bees. So if you just put a hive every 10 meters along a fence line around the garden, now you're putting bees and plants together. Well, that's a smart move, isn't it? And now you've got honey. That's an extra thing you can sell at market. And the elephants come along and they go, zzz, and they hear that noise and they're like, oh, no, detour, go all the way around the garden, and they don't trample the garden and come and eat all your crops because they don't like bees. So they solve problems.
I give a million examples of this, but I'm wondering if you can touch on, so we've touched on the foundations, we've touched on this kind of cooperative relationship, and I'm wondering if you can touch on kind of the tier 2 or 3 in your mind of, you mentioned really quickly like PEMF and microfrequency, just all these different things. Can you, I don't know, spend a couple minutes just kind of laying out for folks who already have that tier 1 in place, or a solid foundation of it? Can you talk about the tier 2? I think the other benefit of talking about the tier 2 and 3 is realizing that they are tier 2 and tier 3, and they're not the foundations. And again, we don't want to skip the foundations and just go to these higher levels, because like you said, you are running into these blocks in terms of working with the zoo animals and trying to work on all these other higher level functioning and approaches when the foundations were missing. So can you give us some perspective and some insight as to maybe just, you know, little sneak peek?
Yes, I can. It's a big can of worms, so I'm trying to filter in my head really quickly. So regenerative medicine is this concept that the body can regrow. And we're familiar probably, you know, that if you pick up a certain type of lizard by its tail, the tail will come off in your hand and the lizard will escape. And that's how it gets away from snakes or anyone else that's trying to eat it. So you'll drop its tail and then it'll regrow a tail. That's regenerative medicine. Okay. Now the lizard doesn't know that, he's just being a lizard, but the body has the ability to regrow an appendage. You know, it's not an insignificant, but it's not just like a flap of skin. You know, there's a spine that goes all the way down that. Right, so, or not all the way, but there's, you know, there's like, this is a fairly complex piece of machinery that is being right, and we used to think in humans that we couldn't regrow our brain. Like if we had anything with our brain, that was just set for life, and if we damaged nerves, that they were just broken forever. But now we realize that no, that's plastic too, that can also regenerate. So as far as I'm aware, and as far as I've seen in the literature, there is no part of the body that can't be regenerated. So we're not talking about just putting some scar tissue over the top of something. We're talking about regrowing a fresh one. Now, I'm not saying you cut your arm off and it'll regrow, because we're not like equipped, that body doesn't have that ability, but you can repair organs. You can repair blood vessels. You can see, when you're a kid, when anyone who's young, like whether you're an animal or a human, when you're young, you heal yourself using stem cells. And as you get older, the number of free growth floating stem cells diminishes. And so you tend to heal it instead with scar tissue. So the problem with scar tissue is that it's like a seal. It's like varnish over the top. Nothing gets through, including the blood vessels. So there's now no blood supply to that area. And when there's no blood supply to an area, it's effectively non-functional. It's not dead and diseased in the sense it has to be cut out of the body, but it's non-functional. So you've lost some functionality because of a scar tissue. And you can see scar on the outside because it's white. It doesn't have the pigmentation. It doesn't have the blood flow. It doesn't. So if we can go back to the healing that you have when you're young, of using stem cells to give you a new version of something, then you've got a far better way of keeping the body fully functional. So stem cell therapy and PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma, and some other things that go together with this, and blood transfusion stuff that, you know, very carefully used, is regenerative. So this is another whole level. So if something's not healing after we've built the foundations in and we've done some, you know, the body's now starting to operate how it's supposed to, well, you've still got old in there. Now you can go to the next level and say, well, let's put new in there. Let's stimulate the new. So we've already done the majority of the work to solve the problem, take away the stressor, take away the adjuvant, take away the problem that was causing it. But now we need to optimize the healing. And so if we put young in, then young can take over and young can then optimize. And even though you're in an older body, the youthful factors that you're getting in from that kind of therapy can do that. Now we can do that with light and sound. We can do that using the things on the electromagnetic spectrum, because all of our organs and all of our pets' organs, they're all, because there's electrical currents coming through, the body has to communicate with itself to tell itself what to do. There's electrical stimulation, and so there's a frequency there, right? And so when you can get two things on in the same frequency as each other, they'll match. Like if you could, let me think about how to. Okay, so the proverbial opera singer in the glass. Okay, so you're holding up a crystal glass and the opera singer's over here going, oh, I'm bringing out this note. Now when she hits the note that is the same resonant frequency as that glass, the glass explodes, right? Because they've matched. And so then something happens, right? So we can take that principle, and when one of our organs isn't working properly, let's say it's my heart that's kind of just diseased in some way, right? But we know that a heart is supposed to resonate on this frequency here. So now I can use pulse frequency specific microcurrent, which you can't even feel. Like it's so microcurrent, you can't even feel it. So it's not like electroshock therapy. Like you got to remember, the first rule in all of this is do no harm, right? That is the oath, that's the Hippocratic oath of do no harm in medicine. Like you should not be having harm done to you. Why anyone can give a drug to anybody when there's a list this long of the things that are harmful doesn't even make sense with the Hippocratic oath. Like if let's go to first principles of the ethics of how to heal somebody, whether they've got 2 legs or 4, that's wrong. do no harm is the oath you've sworn. So we're talking about electrical current that you can't even feel. So there is absolutely no harm at all. There's no burn, there's no, right? But you're just using that to match. So you set this machine at the level that your heart is supposed to be going at, and you put that next to it there and allow them to talk to each other, pick up that frequency. This heart now will match that frequency, and this machine is bringing that heart back into alignment of how to optimize itself. And then the disease falls away because the heart is now able to do what it's supposed to do. And as long as you've got the proper nutrition and all those foundational things to keep it sustained, right, now that you've brought it back in alignment, you have a regenerated heart. Right? I mean, there's just so many examples of what's possible. And it does start to get a bit technical because we are talking about quantum mechanics, quantum physics, quantum healing, right? Which can be a bit bamboozling for some people. We don't have to go there. Again, I did that for you, so you don't have to worry. I can just say, hey, why don't you use PEMF to heal that broken bone, right? Because if you use pulse electromagnetic field therapy around a broken bone, you're accelerating the healing process. Now, do you want to make sure you're having plenty of calcium and other minerals at the same time? Yes, you do. Do you want to make sure you're sleeping and resting and getting fresh air? Yes, you do. Do you want to make sure you're moving it so it doesn't get static and in the wrong place and set the wrong way? Yes, you do. Right. So you've got to have that foundation. But once you've got those, you can accelerate your healing. You can mend a broken bone faster by using some of these therapies, and therefore you've got less downtime suffering, you've got less muscle wastage because of the time delay of not using the limb, you've got less boredom and frustration of being in pain. Like, who doesn't want all the good things? And there's no harm.
So that was a really good overview, because I know you know like a million different specific therapies. So I really appreciate that you kind of gave the overview of kind of how they work, because it can seem a little woo-woo, right? For folks who are like, what? Frequencies? Like, please. But there really is a science to it. And like you said, that it's really on every level, whether it's light, whether it's sound, whether it's frequencies, like there's just a lot of different, really exciting therapies out there. So for folks who are listening and are like, yes to all of the things, I'm jealous of Katie for having Penny on speed dial all the time, and I want Penny on speed dial. Can you tell folks kind of what that looks like in terms of what kind of support you offer for pet parents?
So there's two main pathways, right? So you can meet with me, and we can have a conversation about what it is that you're hoping to achieve for your pet. And then we can build a program that is, going to take you on that journey. And that's a one-on-one scenario. So you get all of my attention, and we'll take as long or as short as it takes to get those results. And we can go up and down that pyramid according to where you are and where your needs are. So it's very, very specific and very, very tailored. Alternatively, if you're wanting to learn the foundation pieces, to get an understanding of, okay, well, where am I even? How am I doing so far? Like, I know I've got the best pet in the world. I know I love them more than anybody else in the world loves their pet. So I must be doing something right. Yeah, we know that. So, but actually, I'm starting to think that maybe there's a few things I could tweak. Well, then coaching program is probably the best option, because you can go through with a cohort of people who are in exactly the same kind of mindset of you, of wanting to know where are they and how can they optimize. You can cross-pollinate news and information and help each other with your learning, but you've got, well, both of us in the room, right? So you have Katie as the expert to take you on your own health journey, to be applying these principles for your own self and your own family. And then you've got me to help you take that same journey for your pets to build that foundation in. And the good thing is, it's pretty much identical, right? This is why it's pet and ferret longevity, because the science, the biology, the cells and everything is the same. So what you can do for you can do for your pet. You just tweak it ever so slightly to make it species appropriate. So you get that point. So the journey, we start with 6 months, because you really need some time to dig into each one of those topics and understand the mechanics behind it, understand a little bit of the science to know why, but then we focus mostly on the how. How do we do that? Which one do I buy? How often do I use it? If this is the scenario. And so you get to ask all those questions on coaching. So coaching is so powerful, because group learning is more powerful than solo learning. Group coaching is powerful because you don't feel alone in that. There's sharing of information, and you've got two experts in the room. So coaching is super popular, and probably, well, that's the best way to get the foundation. I'll put it that way. That's the best way to get the foundation, because you'll do that a whole lot faster in a group than if you do that with me one-on-one. So typically, once you've done that, then you can go into the one-on-one for stuff to do with the animal welfare, mental health, cognitive stuff, animal training, animal desensitization and socialization stuff. All of that kind of stuff, that would be something that we could do on a one-on-one basis. Or if you wanted a biohacking type of stem cell therapy and all those other things I just mentioned, then that would be a one-on-one consultation thing.
Yeah, we tend to repeat ourselves a lot when we're working with folks one-on-one. And that's why we created the coaching program, is because, okay, let's all get together. Let's all go through this together. And then if we want some one-on-one time, we can supplement with that. But there's no point in, it makes more sense to come at it from a group setting when you're learning the foundations, because it's just more accessible in terms of, right, our one-on-one time versus a group coaching time. As an investment, it makes more sense to do it in a group setting and then get more individualized approach one-on-one. But what I will say is, because we keep the coaching small, there's still a lot of one-on-one that happens. And that was definitely intentional, because at the end of the day, health is super personal, right? You want to know that, like, if you're sharing in a community, you want to know the people you're sharing with, and the insights that you get from other people going through this at the same time is so profound. So do you want to talk about our workshop this weekend? Because this is kind of the next step in terms of where folks can go next with getting a taste of what implementation actually looks like.
Well, that's exactly it. So this is a taster. So guys, you would have heard us talk about the workshop being part of the VIP package. So we gift all the VIPs a free ticket to this. This is a $1,000 event. When we sell this as a like public domain space, you guys as VIPs get a free ticket to that event, and that's all weekend. It's 4 hours on Sunday, 4 hours on Sunday with Katie and myself, and we give you that taster. We take you through some of that foundational stuff. You've now heard quite a lot about it with this talk here. So we don't teach you what they are, we show you how to do it. It's a very hands-on implementation day. A lot of fun. We do it as a group. We've got our cameras on, and we're like effectively in the room together. Like if we were doing it in real life, we'd come around to your house, knock on the door, and you say, come in, and then we go around and we do it all together. It's really fun. But we're showing you how to make it real in 2 days. And it's nothing that's hard. There'll be a few things you might decide to put in the trash can because you're like, I'm never going to use that again. Didn't know that was so bad, but now it's gone from my life for good. And there'll be a few things that you might write down on your shopping list. So like, okay, well, I think I'm going to buy a pet bed that is made of cotton or wool instead of one that's made of memory foam, for example, right? So you will learn a few things like that, and everyone's list of what they're throwing away and what they're accumulating or investing in is going to be a little different, because it's personalized. But we'll take you through, answer your questions. There's loads of time to engage with us directly and ask the question, but we're going to give you as much as we can so that you, coming out of the summit and having your head kind of like exploding a little bit, hopefully in a good way, that doesn't then just cut off like that. You know, when you finish, it's like going on school camp and like your energy is crazy on school camp, you're doing all these things, and then the final night has the big concert and everyone's doing a concert, and then you come back and it's like, and the pace just goes to zero like that, and you're just like, oh, well, okay, back to ordinary then. So we don't want that to be the experience. The high of the summit and all of the things you're learning, the enthusiasm and excitement is like, okay, now let's just catch you as you fall off the end of that cliff there and go, right, let's come along here. So the workshop is really your taste to see what can you do in 24 hours? You know, how much of a difference can you make so easily? Because most of these things are a simple tweak. You just need to know why what you were told to previously is not quite true or not quite right or not reflecting the science, not whatever. A little bit of that, so that then you can make the decision to say, I'm going to change that, and know what it is to change. It's very, very powerful. It doesn't, like, I teach this to kids. This is not a science lesson. It is not complicated. We're not doing any quantum mechanics in this one. Okay, so this is super fun. and very approachable, and then you have results by the end of Sunday.
Love it. So folks can join us at the workshop. If you're a VIP, you already have a ticket. If you're not a VIP, stay tuned. We are going to be telling you how you can join us, how you can purchase a ticket. I will say VIPs though, like an amazing deal because you have like all the raffles and the recordings for life and all of that. So highly recommend. But then for folks who are interested potentially in working with you one-on-one or for doing the coaching program, how can they learn more about that?
Okay, so there's basically the website is my website, drzoolittle.co, is the pathway forward to working with me on that one-on-one basis. So there's a place there where you can book an appointment with me. I offer 15-minute introductory sessions. So if you want to have a free session with me, just to discover what it would be like to work with me, what you would find out along the way, what we could achieve for you, where you want to go, that's free of charge. You can just jump on the line and we'll do that. And then if it's a fit, we go forward. And if it's not, then, you know, my blessings to you, and I hope we touch base again somewhere. But there's also on drzoolittle.co, you'll find a free quiz that you can take. And that is just a super fun way of finding out how am I tracking so far on some of those foundational things. So if you're thinking maybe the workshop is really cool, but I don't know where I'm at, maybe coaching is really cool, but I don't know where I'm at, that quiz can be really handy ways to say that you're kind of at this level, these are the things you're getting right, these are the things that you might start to look at. And so if you did the quiz and then wanted to come to coaching, or did the quiz and wanted to come to the workshop, you could ask the question, say, okay, this is the answer I got on question 7. There's only like 10 questions, it's not a hard quiz. Then, you know, we can unstick you on that and get the ball rolling. So both of those on my website. That's it, easy.
Cool. Well, we will share all of the links for that. So we will share the links to get registered for the workshop, for a free discovery call with you if folks are interested in learning more about working with you one-on-one or working with you in our dual coaching program. We'll share the link for the quiz. And I think that's everything, right?
See you on the weekend. Come and join us on the weekend. It's just so fun.
Yeah, it is. And it's so great to get to meet everyone. Like,
yeah, because you've seen our faces this whole time, and we've seen your names popping up in emails and messages and the Facebook group, and you know, and shortly we're going to do the prize pool thing, so we'll know who the winners. Well, the names start to be very familiar. We don't know who you are. Can we please meet you? Like, come in and bring your pets as well. Love to have a furry friend in the frame as well.
Penny, as we're wrapping up, is there anything else that we didn't talk about today that you want to speak to, or anything else is just kind of speaking to your heart that you want to share with folks listening?
We choose to have pets in our lives and go to the zoo or go into nature or go on safari or one of those things because we're drawn to animals. We love them. There's something about them that calls to us. And that is a part of, I don't know, it's a universal part of the human condition to be drawn to nature and animals in that way. And there's something in us that calls out to say, I want to look after you. I want to give you something. There's a compulsion. We have to put signs up in the zoo everywhere. Please don't feed the animals, right? Because everybody has a natural inclination to give something to them, to gift them, right? Because we want to be connected. We want to make friends with them. So I love what I do because it's facilitating that. It's giving full glory and participation to that interaction together. But we put the signs up in the zoo because people tend to give the animal the wrong thing and then they get sick, or they get food from 1,000 people and then they get fat. So from a welfare point of view, it's not great. So we have to put those signs up. This is a sort of, you know, there's an equivalence there because a lot of the things that you've been told, a lot of the things that I was told, like I'm not special in this, you know, I fed kibble before I knew any better because that was what was pet food, right? I have forgiven myself for that and I don't do it again, you know, but we all start somewhere because we all want to give to the animals. So this journey of wherever it is, whether you've just come from the summit, whether you've got a pet for the first time, we've had pets all your life, you want that connection with them. Learn how to do it the way that they want to receive it, the way that makes it best for them, because at the end of the day, this is a heart thing, this is a love thing. And what is love if it's not putting the other person first? So finding out what your animal really needs is putting them first, which is actual true love. You need to sacrifice in order to give that. Love genuinely is a sacrifice, right? Because if it's not, then it's not love, it's selfishness, right? There's a nuance in there. Your desire for someone else to have the best or better, and you're willing to take a hit yourself for them in order to have that, is really true sacrificial love, right? So I'm not suggesting that we go without anything, because I'm suggesting when we do this, it comes straight back. When we take the time to learn a few things, when we take the time to give them what's really required, they receive that love, they give it back in 1,000-fold, their health gets transformed, their quality of life goes through the roof. That makes you happy, that makes them happy. It's the gift that just keeps on giving. You're now enabled to do what's inside of you all this time, which is to give out love, to give out love, to give out love, and to make life better, knowing that you're doing it the right way, knowing that it's the healthy way, knowing it's the way that's going to give them extra years of life, knowing that you're not doing harm. That's all I have.
Well, that's a really beautiful place to end it. So thank you, Penny, for your time, for your expertise, and for being my partner in crime in this crazy journey that we've been on the past year in pet and parent longevity, and for making it what it is, and for continuing to give people hope and reminders to not only forgive themselves, but reminders that there's a lot that they can do, and there's a lot that, if they're willing to take that next step, there's a whole community of people who wants to support them.
Right? Yeah,
And we
never alone.
Yeah, we all need more community. We all need more support in our health and our pets' health. It's an area that our society has been lacking in for a long time. So the community here at Pet and Parent Longevity, for anyone who's listening, like, you have thousands and thousands of people who can relate to you, and we definitely want to support you in that journey, because that's why we do this. So thank you, Penny, and
Thank
until
you.